Thank you so much for joining the Surrey Board of Trade. I am Heather Booth, Events and Communications Manager of the Surrey Board of Trade. I want to welcome you to this morning's Impact Learning Lab. I want to remind you that if you have any questions during the session today, please put your questions or comments in the chat function, and we will get to them after Eamonn's presentation today. It is my pleasure now to introduce your facilitator this morning. Eamonn Percy has a 30-plus year career as a business strategist and veteran business leader. He is a best-selling author, national award recipient for professional leadership and community service, and a top 40 under 40, and a national speaker columnist on leadership, business, and entrepreneurship. Today, he is the founder and CEO of the Percy Group, a business advisory firm that helps high-performing entrepreneurs achieve a 2 to 5 times cash flow. Eamonn, over to you.
Well, good morning, Heather, and good morning to all the participants on the call here today. I am very excited to be with you and very excited about this particular topic. I think it's absolutely timely that we understand how do we help our employees and our teams be the best that they can be during the age of COVID. So I'm going to go through the slides, and I understand from Heather that we're going to hold the questions till the end. But you can enter them into the chat or into the Q&A, and we'll deal with those as they go along. If there's something very pressing, Heather's going to hop in and add to it or bring me back on track. But in the meantime, we'll go through the entire presentation, and then we'll have lots of time at the end. So please, I want to make this engaging. I want you to be able to take away items out of this that are going to make a big difference when you go back to your offices. So don't hesitate to get those questions lined up, and we'll deal with those at the end, which I have some time set aside for. So very important topic here today. I work with a number of companies, as Heather mentioned, and virtually all of them are dealing with this exact problem right now. And I say a problem because it's a shift from what we've done before. So when the Surrey Board of Trade approached me about putting on this learning lab today, I got really excited because I know this is what's happening in the real world, and it's a great way to connect to the membership of the Surrey Board of Trade with what's really happening. So let's dive right into it. So here's an outline of what we're going to cover off today. I'm going to go through the agenda real briefly here. Then I'm going to give a very brief introduction about myself. I don't need to add much more to what Heather's already done. Then I'll go through the 3 key takeaways that I want you to take away today. I like when I do these webinars or seminars. I'm a very practical person, being an engineer. I want you to be able to take away some items that you can implement immediately. So I'll spend a bit of time on that. Then I'm going to go through some remote work statistics. Again, being an engineer, I like to be data-driven and understanding what's really happened, not the perception of what's happening, but the facts behind it. So I've got some interesting statistics to share with you, which will take about 5 minutes. Then I'm going to go through the 3 obstacles to managing remote teams, because you can't get better at managing remote teams if you don't know what the key obstacles are. Finally, I'll go through the 5 steps to effective remote team management. And again, I do this for a living, so I understand what companies need to do. Talk a little bit about implementation, and then I've set aside, we'll call it 15 minutes, maybe 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions or discussion as we go along before we finally wrap up. Okay, so with that, let me dive right into it. As Heather mentioned, I spent 25 years in the corporate world, actually running companies. I was an executive and a president of running at least 2 companies. And today what I do is I take everything that I learned in the corporate world and I help mid-sized companies today grow their business. So I worked with a number of big international companies. I worked across different sectors. And I worked across different stages as well, from startup stage all the way through growth and then ultimately to mature. I am an electrical engineer, but I very early on went into the business world because I love business. And so I've been able to take everything I've learned in the corporate world over those 25 years and apply it to companies today. And it's really, for me, it's very exciting because there's so much happening in the world. And to be able to see these entrepreneurial companies and impact the lives of people is very satisfying. So that's it. And as Heather mentioned, I wrote a book as well. Got a copy of it here. It's called The 1% Solution: How Small Daily Changes Produce Massive Long-Term Results. And it's about building good habits over a long period of time that can help you achieve any goal you want. I literally started in the stock room and went all the way, built my career up to the boardroom, and absolutely everything I learned along the way I put into this book, which is available on Amazon. So let's get right down into it. Now, I have great experience and I can help companies, but the one thing I've learned over all of that time is my own, what I call my belief system in and around businesses. So I believe, and it's taken me a while to really understand this, and this is what drives me, and this is what encourages me to put on learning labs such as the one today. To me, I really do believe that the goal of a business owner, executive, entrepreneur, or manager is to increase business performance so that you can get higher profit, but it's not for the sake of profit. Profit is not enough. It's a minimum in order to build a sustainable and valuable business, but the real driver long-term is purpose. So everything I do, not only in my own personal world, but with my client companies, and I encourage folks like the people that are on the call here today, is to think about those 3 steps. What can you do from a performance perspective that will make yourself and your business more valuable so you can ultimately contribute to a higher purpose? And if managing remote teams, understanding how to do that and building the skills to make that happen is part of it, then it's perfectly aligned with building purpose. And building purpose in my world can be contributing to things that are most important to you. Could be your family, could be your community, could be the world at large. There's a whole variety of things that drive purpose. And today we're going to talk about how do you increase your business performance, specifically around managing remote teams. So the 3 key takeaways today. So the world changed dramatically over the last 12 months. I don't need to say that. We all understand how significant COVID has been in terms of the impact, not only in the business community, but on the lives of many other people. One of the key changes was driving people from working typically in an office to working remotely. And as a result of that, I fundamentally believe that it's shifted the world for the foreseeable future. So in other words, I truly do believe that remote work, forms of remote work, hybrid versions of remote work, percentages of people working from home is here to stay. And I think it was moving down that path anyways, given the technology platforms that were available. And I think COVID really pulled ahead 10 years worth of, at least 10 years worth of technological change to enable the way we do work. And it pulled it into 1 year. So my first key takeaway for you is to think that this is not just a skill you need to learn for the next 3 months or 6 months. Remote work is here to stay. And think about changing your paradigm. Think about changing the way you view your work, either if you're a supervisor, a manager, an executive, or an owner, or even an employee. Think about it. And there's a lot of dynamics around that, which we're going to get into. But number 1, remote work is here to stay. Secondarily, remote work requires new tools and skills. So we get shifts in the economy regularly. And I've been working in the business world for more than 30 years right now. And I have seen fundamental and incredible shifts that have changed the way we've done business over time. I literally started my career pre-internet, and it's probably hard to imagine for a lot of people on the call here, but yes, there was a period of time where we didn't have the internet, and the internet came along and shifted the way the world worked. And though mobility changed the way the world worked, globalization changed the way the world worked. So this is another shift. The key thing about these shifts, and here's what I want you to remember, the key thing about these shifts is when they happen, it is important, it's important that you come up with the new tools and skills for this new world. So don't think that this is a temporary change that's going to go back to another way. No, this is something that requires you as the supervisor or the leader or the manager to come up with a new skill set and new tools. And today we're going to talk about some of those tools. Now, the final key takeaway. So number one, it's here to stay. Number two, it's about you developing the new tools and to manage in this world. The third thing is it's really important to use these tools to become more competitive. And we're talking mostly about business owners and entrepreneurs and managers today. So, but it also applies to the individual. I think over our lifetime, we will likely see virtually everybody working in some sort of an independent gig type environment, let's say over the next 10 or 20 years. And I think seeing people work remotely with mobility, etc. And the companies that survive and then thrive in those environments are the ones that are going to become more competitive because they can implement these new tools. So if you can take away those three ideas, and I'll dive down into the details here to about how we can actually make that happen, that would be great. But those are the three key takeaways. All right, so I'm going to keep pressing ahead here because Heather said we'll take the questions at the end. Now, let's get right into the remote work statistics. Okay, so I've got a few pages of interesting statistics from a site called Flex Jobs, and then I've got another one from the Harvard Business Review. And I found these quite fascinating. Let's step back for a second. Okay. So here's the first one. So Gartner is a big data company in the US. A Gartner survey of company leaders found that 80% plan to allow employees to work remotely at least part of the time, and 47% will allow employees to work from home full time. So 80%, vast majority will enable some form of remote work for the foreseeable future. PwC survey of almost 700 CEOs, 80% of those agree that remote work and collaboration is here for the long term. So in other words, number of companies are embracing this as the path going forward. I work with a lot of companies, I'm involved in a lot of groups, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I can tell you in the early days of the pandemic that very quickly companies were figuring out, and the owners of companies, how do we make this work for the long term? So it's not going to go away. The majority of companies are already thinking about this long term. All right. In a FlexJob survey, 65% of respondents report wanting to be a full-time remote employee post-pandemic, and 31% want some form of hybrid, 96% who desire some form of remote work. You know, again, anecdotally, I'm hearing this everywhere. There's so many people that enjoy most of the aspects of working from home, and maybe not all. There's always some issues with it, but the vast majority, and the statistics support this, enjoy working from home or some version of working from home. 27% of workers say that the ability to work from home is so important that they're willing to take a 10 to 20% pay cut to work remotely. So I'm working with a company right now that is offering employees to work 4 days a week and have the 5th day work from home, and they take an 80% of their, they take 80% of their regular pay, they work 4 days, and they have the 5th day off. So it's 4 days, and some of those 4 days are working from home. And it's becoming so important to people that they're willing to sacrifice economically because there's some intangible benefits, and that's what the data here supports. 81% that say that they'd be more loyal to their employer if they had flexible work options. So in other words, remote work attracts and retains talent. It's important that you know these statistics, because if you're managing people, this is what's going through their mind right now. This is what they're thinking about with respect to the way that they want to work. And if you're not understanding how important that is to people, then you might miss some of the nuances of managing people. Next one. Research shows that business loses $600 billion a year to workplace distractions, and the remote workers are 35 to 40% more productive than their in-office counterparts. I take a bit of exception to some of this. I think there's some productivity gains to working at home, but I also think there's some productivity losses as well too. So my goal here today is to give you the skills to make sure that you get more productivity with people at home rather than being on the loss column. Despite the tumultuous year in 2020, remote workers report a workforce happiness index of 75 out of 100 compared to 71 for your in-office employees. So yeah, I would say mostly that, again, my experience and the data seems to support that remote work increases job satisfaction. So according to this information that we have here, the actual hard data, you can see there's not only a trend to remote work, but there's a lot of positives on behalf of the employees. The key though is to understand how do you actually manage that for maximum effectiveness. Now, in addition to that, there's some information about how long remote work will be in place. So according to Upwork, 41% of American workforce continues to work remotely. Although an estimated 26% will still be working from home through 2021, 36 million Americans will be working remotely by 2025. I actually think it's going to be a much higher number than that because that's only 22% of the workforce. So it says a staggering 87% increase in the number of remote workers prior to the pandemic. I think that number is actually underestimated, and I mentioned early on, it's here to stay. So those are all positives about remote work, but there's also some negatives about remote work. And what I want to do today is to give you that nuance between the two. I'm not here to pitch or sell you anything. I'm here to help you learn how to manage people remotely. That's my number one goal here today. So it's really important that you understand both aspects of it. So according to the Harvard Business Review, they wrote an article called A Guide to Managing Your Newly Remote Workers. There's four main issues or concerns with managing people remotely. I added the fifth. Number one, Harvard talks about the lack of one-on-one supervision. I think this is quite a serious issue because a lot of people, even people that are fairly self-motivated, self-driven, later stage in their career, there really is this need to be able to have a lot more interaction, accountability, and one-on-one supervision. And not everybody works well remotely. And there's certainly huge benefits when you're in an office. You're walking by people, you're connecting with people, you're talking to people, and that might be several times a day, or even several times an hour, depending on how closely you work with somebody. And that's a form of supervision. If you're the supervisor and you're walking by and checking in with one of your employees, it's a form of supervision. They can ask you a question, you can engage with them, and that's more difficult with remote work. There's definitely the issue of social isolation with remote work. And I think we're going to see that continue to be a bigger problem going forward. It's great to be home if you're properly set up and you can connect and you can do other things. But I know a lot of people get the vast majority, or certainly a significant amount of their social interaction through the workforce. And some of it can be quite significant depending on a person's personal circumstances. And that's also very important for culture as well, too, because most very successful companies that I work with, they use the social interaction as a way of building culture that builds a great company. And it's possible to do that remotely, but it's increasingly difficult. Another concern people have is poor access to information. So direct and indirect information. Yeah, you might get the occasional email or a note from your boss, or if you're the supervisor, you might be checking in and connecting with people. But there's a lot to be said about the nuanced information you get when you're close to people in a more physical work environment. And the last one is at-home distractions. I can completely relate to this. I'm a pretty motivated, disciplined person, and I even find it challenging sometimes at home if there's distractions in place. And I don't have any kids here, but I can imagine if you're a young family, you've got kids, or if you've got elderly parents you're taking care of, or if there's something else going on, depending on your circumstances, it's easy to get distracted. And even though many people may want to do their best work at home, they may not be able to because of these distractions. What I added, number 5, this is in addition to the Harvard information, was lack of proper workspace and infrastructure. Not everybody is super well set up at home, and it can be quite challenging if you don't have proper desk, proper ventilation, proper computer systems, proper lighting, proper phone. There's so much that goes into creating a great workspace that if you don't have that, that can be quite a challenge for remote workers. So what I want to do is present the world of remote workers and what you need to do as a supervisor so that you can manage people effectively in that world. Now, normally I would stop and take questions along the way here, but I understand that we're going to go right to the end. So let's keep on going here, and then we'll open it up. So again, if you keep track of your questions, ask me anything you like. After we're gone through this, I'm keeping a really close eye on time here because time has a way of flying by, and I want to make sure that we leave time for any questions. It's really important to me that I make this engaging because it's all about what you can take out of this and take back to your workforce. So I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit here and just make sure that we have sufficient time as we go through all of this. Okay. So I talked about the 3 takeaways that you're going to have today. Here's the 3 things that you will learn today. Number 1, you're going to learn what are the obstacles to effective managing people remotely. Then I'm going to teach you a 5-step process to managing remote teams, and then I'll talk about implementation. Not talk about it. I will show you how to implement this well. This is what I do each and every day is I help companies very practically build out ways to grow their business. And I believe in giving people very specific tools. I also understand from Heather that we're going to be making these slides available. So at some point very soon after this presentation is over, I will be sending the slide deck to Heather, and I understand that she will be sending that to everyone. So you don't necessarily need to take notes on all of this. You can if it helps your retention, but you will be getting copies of this as well for yourself. Okay, so that's what you're going to learn today. So let's start with number 1. What are the 3 obstacles to effective remote management? Now, everybody is different. I get that. I've been doing this for a while. I understand how things can be different for where you are in your career. You might be a new manager, you might be more seasoned, you might be an executive, you might be starting in the workforce for the first time. And I really want to emphasize this first point. So the first obstacle to effective remote management is you, the supervisor or the manager, and specifically the manager's inability to shift mindset, skills, tools, and approaches to a new paradigm. So if you're managing a remote team and you're being challenged right now about how do you manage that remote team, and it's not immediately obvious what you need to do, you need to go back and take a look at yourself, your managerial skills, your leadership skills, your approaches, and understand what you need to do. You need to do differently. And I'm not saying you're the obstacle to everything, but if you don't have the right mindset for this paradigm shift over time, and if you think it's going to go away pretty quickly and we'll go back to normal and it's the way things used to be done, there's going to be a problem. So I would highly encourage you as we go through this to think about yourself and your own mindset and your tools and your skill set. What do you have and what are you bringing to the table today? And do you clearly understand what is necessary? If you don't feel that you can objectively or partially view that, have somebody that you trust. I call them accountability partners. This could be a business partner, could be a colleague, could be a boss, to help you understand what you might be lacking there. So that's first and foremost, is your ability to shift to a new paradigm. Okay, here's the second one that is an obstacles to managing remote teams. An underemphasis on management and an overemphasis on management and an underemphasis on leadership. So in other words, what I've learned over my career, because I started as a shop floor production supervisor and I worked my way up through a number of different roles and eventually became an executive. And when you start off as a supervisor and manager, you're really managing people. That's a series of skill sets. As you go higher in an organization, you shift over to leadership. And I'll talk really briefly about the differences. What I encourage managers to do, no matter how early they are in their career, is to always keep that leadership element in the background. And this is even more important now than ever for remote work, because leadership management is all about directing people on what to do. Leadership is all about showing yourself how people need to do something. The values, the belief, the listening skills, the vision. It's the softer side. And it's more difficult, but more important that you do that right now with remote work than ever. So as you go throughout your day, start to think about the management skills you need, for sure, as I mentioned in number one, but don't forget that you're first and foremost a leader. Even if you have 2 or 3 or 4 employees at home and you're a young manager just getting started, still think about that. It's really important, because right now people need that leadership, and there's a distinct lack of leadership right now. And I highly encourage you to be a leader within your organization. So what's the third one? I touched on this a little bit earlier with respect to infrastructure. But to me, the third one is a lack of a systematic infrastructure, management processes, data-driven decision-making, and routine business processes to help employees both feel and be empowered and successful. So if you're working from home, and yes, you have projects, yes, there's things that you're doing, but you need structure around you. And right now, people are feeling highly disoriented, given how quickly the world has changed as a result of COVID, job losses, businesses are being transformed, et cetera. And your job as the leader is to put some structure, some touch points, some processes around the employee. And if you're not doing that, it's going to be more difficult to manage them remotely. You can't just send them an email and kind of hope for the best that they'll get back to you by Friday. You got to make sure that they have a systematic approach and all the support infrastructure, especially if you're a bigger company. It's really important to do that. So just think about those 3 obstacles. I'm going to do a time check here. Okay, we've got 9:30. And I'm going to start moving into what you actually need to do. So I think we should be wrapped up the presentation here in about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll turn it back over to Heather for questions and discussion. Next, now, so those are the obstacles to effective remote team management, paradigm shift, overemphasizing management, underemphasizing leadership, and a lack of a systematic infrastructure to support people. So given that, what are the 5 steps to effectively managing remote teams? So you're an employee, maybe it's a not-for-profit NGO, maybe it's a crown corporation, maybe it's a big retailer, maybe it's a manufacturing facility, who knows, maybe a consulting firm, big, small, who knows. And what I've done is I've written all 5 of these so that they can be relevant for where you are. And if we need to clarify that, we'll do that during the Q&A. But think about these 5. Now, these ones you might want to write down. By the way, every time you write something down, it reinforces the idea in your mind. So I'm a great believer in, I carry a notebook everywhere I go. And funny enough, after I've written it down, I don't actually go back and look at it that much, but it's the process of writing it down that really helps in my mind. So what are the 5 things you need to do to effectively manage remote teams? Number 1, and I touched on this, is delineate between management skills and leadership skills, and then develop appropriately. So if you take the time to understand the world difference between those two, find out where you're weak, also find out where you're strong, and then develop yourself appropriately with some sort of a professional development plan, personal plan, feedback from a supervisor, feedback from a manager, assessment, whatever it happens to be, even if it's just doing 3 things this year to make that improvement, make that delineation between the two, and then come up with those 2, 3, or 4 things that you need to improve over that period of time. So for instance, give an example. One of them, you could be a very extroverted person and you may not do as well in a remote work environment because it's on video. So you might need to work on your leadership skill, your listening skills. But figure out the difference between the two, write down 3 things that you need to improve, and then improve pretty quickly. I would say, over the course of the year, for sure, that's 9 months, if not sooner, and related to remote work, by the way. So that's number 1. Number 2, it's really important to people to have routine structure, check-ins, deadlines, etc. And I'll share a secret with you about what I do. So I'm a business coach to very high-performing entrepreneurs and business owners, big companies. And I've found, both in the world that I'm in right now, but also in my own career, as I mentioned, I climbed up from the bottom through a number of great roles with great companies: Ford Motor Company, Ballard Power. I ran BC Hydro's clean energy division. Really great companies, and I really enjoyed it. But what I learned over the years is that people really want somebody to help them along their journey. You can call it being held accountable. You can call it being supported. Whatever you want to call it, people need and want, and often secretly, somebody to show them and guide them what they need to do, especially if they're early on in their career or early on in the job. Now, they may not say that directly to you, but it's your job as a leader and manager to put that in place. And I recommend establishing routine structures, check-ins. Maybe it's a daily check-in, maybe it's a weekly check-in, deadlines, and then following up on the deadlines. People will actually respect you as a manager, and you will help them work better remotely. I know that if I have a deadline, whether it's a sunny day or not, I've got other things in my mind. I'm focused on that deadline for today if I'm working at home. So establish routine structure. Number 3, provide top-notch infrastructure. And I've been a bit surprised with some companies, quite frankly. They just haven't really invested in the infrastructure employees at home. I know some of the bigger companies are doing that. Google and others are giving employees money to spend on building up their home office. But if you're managing somebody, check in with them. Do they have the right internet connection? Do they have enough bandwidth? Do they need any webcam updates, or is there anything else they need at home that you can help them invest in? And that's going to improve your productivity, so there's an ROI on it. Number 4 is establish what I call rules of engagement. So just because somebody's working at home, it doesn't mean that you don't have expectations of them. They want to know what the expectations are. And if they're employees and you're the manager or the supervisor or the owner of the company, it's really important that you set the expectations, because that's what they want. They don't want it loosey-goosey, open-ended, sort of figured out as they go along. They want to know what you want, and they want to know how they can meet those expectations. So setting expectations, and that can be done. You can either come up with a written approach to it, you can talk through it, you can send emails, whatever you want to do, but help them be successful by setting those expectations. And the last one, provide opportunities for social interaction. And I said remote or otherwise, because even though they're working remotely from home, there still are, depending on where you live and the jurisdiction and where we are with the COVID lifting of the restrictions, you may be able to do things outside of the workplace, the home workplace, on the evenings or the weekends that meet all the COVID requirements. But the idea is, even if you can't do that, it's got to be online. Do that as well. So I know one company, they just celebrated the success of one of their managers from in a big sales function, and they pulled an entire sales reward and recognition dinner at home. And I think they had 20 or 30 people on the call, and they sent them to dinner, and they sent them wine, and they sent them everything to their home, and everybody hopped on it. And they were on the call for a few hours, sharing a social interaction. And yes, it was remote, and yes, it was virtual, but people really enjoy that. Now, as a bonus, develop listening and empathy skills, especially the empathy. Empathy is often underrated in business, but I think it's more critical now than ever to be empathetic. And what do I mean? What is empathy, and what do I mean by that? Develop the ability to both to understand the way another person feels. So especially if they're under some stress, if you have an employee, maybe they have a new child at home, maybe their kids are not at school, they're at home, maybe both the husband and the wife are working from home for whatever the circumstances. Take a little bit of time to be able to understand what they're going through, and then how you can support them. Okay, so there's the 5 steps to managing teams remotely. Now, how do you implement that? I like to focus on your goals of implementing. So what do you want to get out of this? And if you go back to the 5 steps, that should be your goals to implement those 5 steps. The first way you do that is you commit to an action with a plan. So you write down, and it could be when this is done today, you take 30 minutes at the end of this session, you write down, okay, here's the 4 things that I learned from Eamonn today. I'm going to put this in place. I'm not talking about 50-page documents as a plan. I'm talking about what are those few key things that you're going to do. And I talked about developing your own leadership. I talked about rules of engagement, setting expectations with your team. Write those down in a plan. Now, the next thing is, I believe in over-communicating with the teams. Now, I wrote about that in my book that I mentioned previously. I've got a whole chapter on communications. If you're interested in it, you should get a copy of it and read through it. Communication is so critical as a leader. And many people think they're communicating, but they're not. So I highly encourage entrepreneurs and leaders to over-communicate. You don't just say it to one person one time and then walk away. You need to say it, ask them if they understood it, paraphrase what they said, have them repeat it back to you, especially if it's very critical. And then a few days later, communicate it again and communicate it again. It takes 2, 3, 4 times. Not that people don't understand, they do. I'm sure you've got great people on your team, but they need to emphasize the importance of it. So when you're implementing those 5 steps, tell them what they're doing. Say, look, I went through this learning lab. I learned these 5 things, and here's what I want to do. How does that work for you? Do you understand what I'm saying? And is there a different way you'd like to do it? That's what I mean about over communicating. Okay, provide regular updates. So in other words, as you're working with your team, tell them, look, we're going to be doing things differently. We thought we'd be in COVID for a couple of months. We're coming up on a year now. We're changing the way we do business. We're going to check in with you every month, every 2 months, every 3 months. Maybe we do an assessment, an employee survey, maybe whatever we do, we're going to do regular updates on how well it's working for you. And then the final thing, and this is how I started the presentation, and this is what I'll end with, and then we'll switch over to the discussion here. And Heather, we have about 20 minutes or so. The last thing is, I would highly encourage everyone on this call today, no matter where you are in your career and where you are in the organization, managing people remotely is that you work harder on yourself than on your team. So in other words, yes, you have expectations of your team to improve, no question about that, but you put even greater expectations on yourself to be a great boss, great supervisor, great leader, a great manager of people remotely, terrific empathy skills, the ability to listen well, the ability to set expectations. You put all that emphasis on you. Look, we're all going through difficulties right now, and I see it each and every day in my work. It's very challenging on people, and people are under a lot of stress. Some people, they're losing jobs or losing businesses. It's very challenging right now. So it's really important, I believe, and I'd encourage you and all the people on this call here today to constantly think about what you can do so that you can be the best version of yourself to lead your team. And if you have maybe you have young children at home that have never seen you work before, you've always worked in an office and now you're working at home. That's an opportunity to show how you're working on building up yourself. If you've got a remote team and they see the difference underway with you, that's an opportunity for you to see how things are going differently yourself. So yeah, it's really important that you work harder on yourself than anything else. Implement those 5 steps that I mentioned, overcome those 3 key obstacles, and you will have the takeaways that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation to manage your teams effectively going forward. Okay, so we're over to discussions now. And by the way, just before we dive into that, I've attached a contact sheet for myself and my company and what I do. So when you get the presentation, you'll see this at the end and you'll be able to check it out. And if anybody has any specific questions, we can do that. But at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Heather and we'll take any questions.
Thanks, Eamonn. That was such great insights that you've provided for us. There's a question here from the audience. My question is, what is the solution to time zone conflicts? I am stuck between my daytime meetings with my clients all day long, and then at night I have to coordinate with the remote teams. I tried making them work during their nights, but their effectiveness was impacted, leading to more errors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that if somebody's working at night, that tells me they probably have a team in Europe or maybe Eastern Europe or maybe even further away. And I guess the short answer is it's going to be very challenging to change the work patterns of the folks in Europe to work at different times. It really is. I mean, they've got families, they've got lives, quite frankly. So what I would suggest specifically is I wouldn't pursue that approach. Maybe have them shift forward a little bit, maybe a couple hours, maybe you shift back a couple hours. So that's one way that you can meet in the middle. The other way is you can just set up some expectations where you don't necessarily have to get on the phone with them every evening. And it could be written communications or emails or weekly check-in to put less emphasis on daily check-ins, because it sounds like from the question that this individual is working both day and night, and that's hard on both the individual and the team.
Next question here. Do you have any preferred remote office applications that you utilize or recommend?
Yeah, so I'm using Zoom, Skype, Teams, etc. Using Slack. All the big platforms are out there. I'm on my phone constantly, quite frankly. So it depends on the nature of the question the individual's asking. There's so many great applications now, but if it's video, it's the 3 that I've mentioned. Slack is a great tool, and there's other messaging platforms that are available as well.
What do you think about corporate culture? How do you maintain that and develop that with a remote team?
Yeah, that is a great question, and we could do a whole other learning lab on that at some point, Heather. So I'll touch at it at a high level, and hopefully that's a very broad question, so I'm not quite sure what's behind it. And if the individual wants to ask something more specific, I'm happy to take that as well. But let me tell you what my perspective is, so I can respectfully answer the question. So corporate culture is one of what I call the big 4. There was a study done about 20 years ago, and they looked at 200 different management practices to see which ones actually made a difference. And then they measured 160 companies over 10 years, and they looked at their financial performance. And a group of companies was 10x greater than everyone else. Okay, so from a financial perspective, 10x. What were the big 4? Number 1 was strategy. Number 2 was culture. Okay. So of the 4 items, culture is one of the most important aspects of creating long-term financial returns. Just for your audience, number 3 was execution. Number 4 was called structure, which is how you're structured relative to the task at hand. So to answer the question, yes, culture is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. And you will have a culture one way or another. I want to say you, I mean the owner, the boss, the supervisor. They often think that the culture just happens to manifest itself magically, and it doesn't. People emulate what they see in a leadership role. That's why I keep going back to leadership with the individuals that are managing teams. You got 6 people, and if you're not hopping on the calls, and if you're not on time, and if you're not holding yourself accountable, the team will go down that path as well too. So yes, culture is one of the most important things you can do in a company.
What are your thoughts on onboarding new employees in this new remote work paradigm?
Yeah, another great question. So most companies do it poorly. I think it's an incredible opportunity to do it very, very well. So think about what onboarding means. Onboarding really means that you're bringing somebody up to speed that you spend time and energy investing in. You went through an interview process, you went through a recruitment process, they've left their previous role most likely, you're bringing them into your organization. So there's a huge investment in that individual. So your goal from an onboarding perspective, you've got one goal, that is to make them successful, period. It's not to figure out ways to, yes, they have to go through probation, they've got a test period, but even then you want to make them successful. So 3 very specific things. I'll tell you, Heather, what I do with my clients, and then hopefully people will find that helpful. So the first thing I do with my clients is I have them write a 90-day plan for new employees. So they write down what they're going to do week 1, 2, 3, all the way through the 90. And what that does is that sets the expectation for the employees. So the employees know, the new employees coming in, where are the milestones? What do I need to do to be successful? The last thing you want to do is bring somebody in and they're not quite sure how they can be successful. How can they possibly be successful? They don't know what the rules are. So we do 90-day plans. That's the first thing that we do. The second thing we do is we bring them up to speed gradually. So in other words, a lot of employees come in and they just get whacked on the first day and they get overwhelmed. You got to give them some orientation, some time to figure out where they sit in the world and what they need to do. And the third thing, and this is related to remote work, you've got to bring them in a way that they can feel like they're part of the culture. Now, remote work makes it challenging, but not impossible. So if somebody's working remotely and they're coming in, I would not recommend that day 1 they're sitting in their office at 8 o'clock on a Zoom call, the very first day of the company. That's not going to help them be successful. If possible, do a hybrid model. Maybe you get them in 2 days a week. Maybe you get them in with the supervisor. Maybe there's a small team, depending on your circumstances. But find ways to engage them and get that social interaction going early on in the process. Maybe it's something outside of work hours or on the weekend if they have the time. But do those 3 things and you will onboard people so incredibly effectively. And if anybody wants more information about what a 90-day plan is, they can send me an email at epercy@percygroup.ca. I think I might even have it on my blog site. And if not, I will send you, I have a template for a 90-day plan and I can send that to people if they're interested.
You mentioned that one of the biggest obstacles is having a productive workspace. Whose responsibility is it to make sure that your employees have that productive workspace?
I think to the extent possible, the company should be responsible to ensure that you have the infrastructure, at a minimum, have the infrastructure in place. And even further, I'm a bit surprised that, Heather, I thought I would see more companies, services like where a company goes to your home and they do an assessment, they upgrade your router, they ensure that you have sufficient bandwidth, maybe they buy you a stand-up desk or something like that. And I'm seeing some of that mostly from the big companies, but not as much from the small companies. And I think it's a missed opportunity. So I would say it's largely the company's responsibility. However, if you've got a young family at home or other distractions, the company can only do so much. So it's up to you to decide. And the final thought on that, we all work differently. So I'm very personally very sensitive to my work environment, and I set it up a certain way that works well for me. And everybody's different. So take what works well for you. If you're working off the kitchen table right now and it's not working, figure out a different solution. Seriously. That may be convenient, a year ago, but this may go on for another year or 2 years. So you have to do something different. I know people, there's a whole burgeoning business in building backyard offices, 100 square foot, like mini offices. And again, you have to have the space. That's not a bad idea. Do something like that. And when COVID is over, you turn it into a playhouse if you have the space. So it's largely the company to provide the infrastructure, and it's the individual to provide the environment.
How do you make sure that your teams have a work-life balance? It's very hard for people when they're working in their own home to draw that line and say, this is work time and this is lifetime.
Yeah, another great question. So early in the presentation, I talked about establishing rules of engagement or meeting expectations. So to me, that's where it should be. And I think that's the type of area you have a conversation with your employee, and would go something like this. Let's talk about work-life balance, and let's come up with what works and what doesn't. Are you okay with receiving emails in the evening? And they may say, well, you know what, I've got a young family. I can't answer them between 6 and 9, but I can hop on it for half an hour at 10. Or they say, you know what, I'm no problem throughout the week, but I really want to spend the time on the weekends with my wife or my husband, so I'd rather back off. So what I'm saying is, you as a leader, it's your responsibility to make your employees successful. It's up to you. And you need to engage them in a dialogue about what it takes to be successful. Now, I've also been around the block, and I know there's some people that may push the envelope or may take advantage of something like that. So I'm not saying that whatever they want to do goes, but you have to set the expectation. And then if somebody's not following it, you've got something to have a conversation with. I think I generally am more of a work guy on the work-life balance scale, for sure. But I also recognize that not everybody is like that. And right now during COVID, it's very challenging for people. So I've become more attuned to people needing more balance, more of a refresh. And so I think if you have that conversation with them, that'd be the best approach to take.
Do you think that remote work is going to increase the amount of loyalty amongst the younger generation? Typically, the younger generation hasn't been as loyal to their companies.
I think it has the potential to, if it's handled well by the managers. I really do. I really do. I'm exceedingly optimistic about millennials. There's many positive attributes of the millennial culture. And I think companies that understand those attributes and then take the right actions, as I referred to, investing in their infrastructure, setting the expectations, supporting if they want more work-life balance, supporting what that is. I think they'll increase the probability of loyalty, but it doesn't guarantee it. You still need to be competitive in terms of salary and benefits. And you also need to be doing great work, quite frankly. The millennials that I see, one of the reasons I'm quite impressed, they're like, I want to do great work with great people. Yeah, sure, you got to be competitive on salary, but let me do something that's driven by purpose and value creation, and by the way, where I can learn skills. So I think remote work is part of it, but I don't think if you don't handle remote work well, you're going to seriously put yourself at risk of not attracting the top talent. There is, again, a topic for another day, but there is going to be a war on for talent like you've never seen in your life the next few years. I can tell you that. It's just, once the economy, and it's already starting to pick up, and people have options, and they work remotely, and they can be in Vancouver, work for a company in Toronto or overseas or whatever, that's who you're competing with. So now is the time to do those things to keep them loyal.
Do you have any final thoughts before we close?
So thank you very much, everybody, for being on the call here today. I found this absolutely fantastic. I would encourage you to think deeply about what I've discussed today and go back to your workplace and put into practice some of these very specific tips and tools and strategies that I've gone through, I truly do believe will make a big difference. And I think remote work is here for some time. And if you can elevate your game personally as a supervisor or a manager, I think you're going to stand out from the crowd, and I think your business will do just absolutely terrific. As I mentioned, if you want to connect with me, there's more information available there. I typically work with larger companies where I coach CEOs and entrepreneurs and executives, but I also have a small team that works with me, and we do performance improvement, operational improvement, lean manufacturing, etc. And so if that sounds interesting to you, you can connect either on my newsletter by going to my website or send me a note and we can talk about it further. But I really do wish you much success on your journey, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Eamonn, for being with us this morning, and thank you everyone for joining us for this session. We'll be sending you the recording and the facilitator's contact information later today. Many more of these types of sessions are coming up, so be sure to check out our website at businessinsurrey.com and make it a great business day, everyone.